So you might be a great person, but that does not mean that you're a great leader. And what I mean by that, oftentimes leaders, they like, especially in nonprofit organizations, right? They want to please people. They want to make sure they're serving their communities in the best way possible, but not realizing they're doing it at the detriment of themselves. And that's not what leadership is, right? Being able to lead a nonprofit organization requires that you become more discerning and you invest your energy in actions that actually move the needle, right? So if you are taking all your energy as the leader to put into the nonprofit, like you're doing the work in the nonprofit, like you're doing payroll, you're training all the time. You're hosting these workshops that the organization offers. You're doing all the work that's in the nonprofit where you can't really do the work that you need to do on the nonprofit, right? I don't know if you caught that. You're doing the work in the nonprofit and not the work on the nonprofit. As a leader, that sets you back. And that's where I'm going to need you to like evaluate yourself as a leader and determine whether or not the work that you're doing is actually helping with the growth of the organization you're leading and if it's actually helping this organization make an actual impact. Okay. Now, according to a study by Nonprofit Pros, 47% of nonprofits actually don't have the funds that they need to operate effectively. 47%. Now, that's a huge number. And when you think about it, like, are you part of that 47%? Because if you're part of that 47%, I need you to start working to get yourself out. So you're not one of the statistics. Okay. Because that, like, literally, that's nearly half of the sector that's living in a financial quicksand. So half the nonprofits out there actually cannot afford to operate. Now, if you cannot afford to operate, you better learn how to do it effectively because there's so many businesses out there that are doing it. How can you make sure that your business, yes, your nonprofit organization is a business. A lot of people don't like to hear that, but guess what, boo? Like this nonprofit is a business. Okay, it's a business and you're gonna have to like see it as it is. It is a business that you need to operate in the best way possible. So you're not always in a financial bind. You're not always trying to figure out what the next step is. You're not always trying to figure out how am I going to pay this person? How am I going to pay Stacey today? Right? How am I going to pay Joe today? Like, I can't afford to do this, right? This instability that your nonprofit experiences because you're not putting in the work on your nonprofit, it creates chaos. Now, like it becomes so chaotic, like you have delayed decisions, right? Staff burnout, that's another thing. Like your staff is like so overwhelmed because you're giving them a million and one things to do. And that's one thing I want nonprofit organizations, nonprofit leaders to stop doing. Like I had a conversation with one of my clients last last week or over the weekend, we were having a conversation and we were talking about one of their team members. Oh, I'm going to ask her to do this. I'm going to ask her to do this. I had to tell him to stop because I also had a meeting with this staff member to assess what she was working on, and she was working on a lot. So I had to stop him and tell him, you need to stop adding more to her plate because what happens when your team is burnt out, when your staff members are burnt out, they do not do the work in an efficient way and they do not do it effectively. So you need to be very clear as to what each person is trying needs to accomplish and the timelines and deadlines associated with all the tasks that you have to prevent staff burnout. So that was a tangent because it recently just happened. Now, other things that are chaotic when you have instability in your organization, leadership confusion. Now, you might not see it as a thing, but the leaders are just as confused as you and I. Okay? Because then just as confused as you and I when like TikTok went down for a day and came back the next day, just as confused. Okay? So leadership confusion is another thing that can happen. and the vision starts shrinking. Now, not because the mission changed, but because the money did. I don't know if you heard that. The vision starts getting smaller, not because the mission changed, but because there's less money. Okay? So a lot of people like in nonprofit organization, oh, it's not about the money. Yes, it is. Because if you don't have enough revenue coming in your organization, you can't do the work. Because then what are the odds you're going to find 100 volunteers right now? Like, are you well known? Have you been in the community since 1896, 1960? Do people know about you that you just get volunteers like lined up to come volunteer with you? No, you don't. So you do not want to shrink your vision because you're not generating enough revenue to bring into your nonprofit organization where it's able to do the work and implement the programs and services it has in place to serve the community, right? So these are examples of what can happen if you experience instability, financial instability in your organization. Now, if you're watching live and you understand that, I want you to drop a 1 because remember, the more you comment, the more people see this on their feeds. So I'm gonna ask you go ahead and drop a 1 because I'm always here dropping gems and giving you like tips and stuff like that. So that's all I ask. Just drop a 1 in the comments. Let me know you're here. Let me know you're still here. #live if you're still here. Because at this point, I'm going to start requesting you to take action as well because I love teaching, right? And that's all I'm asking. Drop a 1 in the comments or #live. Let me know you're still here because then let's make sure we interact and let's make sure we have a conversation. Yes, I love the likes. Drop the comments because then that does wonders as well on this Facebook app. Okay. Now, let's talk about like why these things are happening. That's another thing. Hey, Mr. Gervin. Let's talk about why these things are happening and what's really going on. Because what I'm seeing often is like nonprofit organizations, like you may be relying too heavily on just 1 or 2 funding sources. Now, let's say you're only depending on 1 to 2 funding sources. What's happening is that when you lose that funding source, you end up being in a bind, right? So I'll give you a few examples of like funding sources that people depend heavily on, nonprofits depend heavily on. We have the grants and seasonal events, right? So grants are restricted. So let's break it down like simply in simple terms so you can understand. Grants are very restricted. A lot of them are, right? So you cannot use that money for operations for a lot of them. Now, there are some unrestricted grants, but if you're looking for the bigger grants that are going to support the work that you're doing, they more often than not, they're very restricted. Okay. And not only that, there's a delayed processing that occurs because some of them are on a reimbursement basis. So you need to have money to make money, right? So for the grants, how that works is that let's say one organization I worked with, they they got a $300,000 grant in 2021. Now, for that 300,000 to be disbursed, first there was an advance, right? They give you an advance, and I believe that advance was 50K. So they got a 50K advance, which was great, right? But remember, I talk about capacity all the time? They didn't have the staff, they couldn't spend that 50K because they have to spend down the advance before they can ask for more. They have to basically spend the 50, spend more, ask for more. Because then when you spend the 50, you submit a financial report to prove that or to show that you utilized the $50,000 because it was on a reimbursement basis, right? And then after they spent that $50,000, they were in a bind to spend more money than that because the 50K, after you submit the financial report for that, you're not going to get like more money than that until you spend more than 50K. So I don't know if you catch my drift. So that organization, they had to hire more staff, put more people on the ground to be able to do the work that they needed so they can spend more than $50,000. And that was all within the span of 3 months. Because then some people think it's very easy to spend that money down. It is not, because when you have so many stipulations around how you can spend the money or not spend the money, then you have to be very careful on how you invest it. So if you're hiring staff to do that work, you have to think about how many of their FTE full-time equivalent hours are actually assigned to that project, because it's really by project, because grants, a lot of grants, they're project based. So you have to submit a proposal, a project proposal of the project that you're working on. And let's be honest, all your team members are not going to be doing the same thing. Okay, they're not going to be doing the same thing. They're not going to be working 100% of the time on the project. Do you have team that works 100% of the time on the project? Probably, but they're temporary staff. Okay, so that's very hard to justify on a grant that they're going to be 100% on there. So when you're doing the financial report, the work that they're doing needs to be for that grant. So that organization I was talking about, they actually ended up hiring outreach staff for this particular project, right? And their plan was to pivot these same staff to other outreach activities after this project. But it took time to hire staff because there was only one person doing the hiring. So it took a little bit more time. So they already had some backup money where they were able to sustain paying their staff until they were able to submit their next financial report in another 3 months. So that's 6 months worth of spending and not knowing where the money is going to come from. So really, like, grants can be delayed. Grants can be really delayed, and processing can take months. Because then, yes, they submitted the financial report like today, but like I was managing that grant when I worked with that nonprofit. The only reason they got it in less than a month is because I'm a stickler. I will send them emails, right? Hey, what's going on? Hey, find you on LinkedIn. Hey, what's going on? And professionally just ask the question. Like if they tell me and ask for like, when should I hear back? 2 weeks come, you tell me 2 weeks, 2 weeks come up, I don't hear nothing. I'm gonna send you an email. Like that follow-up is very important to ensure that processing happens on time. Okay, so with processing taking months, that can be a huge issue. And also, grants are not guaranteed. Grants are not guaranteed, and even a renewal can disappear. Because look at what's happening this year. Like, not that the renewal was disappeared, but what's happening right now is a lot of grants and funds that were allocated to organizations, states, nonprofits, like all across the board was pulled away. Now, I will say that has been such a scary position for a lot of people to be in, because you have a job today and tomorrow you don't. Like that's very hard. So as uh with what I do, I strongly suggest that nonprofits that follow me start working on building your capacity and start working on diversifying your revenue, because these problems are not it. These problems, you don't want these problems. Okay, you don't want these problems, and you want them to not affect the people that you serve and the people that are working with you. Your stakeholders, I kid you not, you don't want them to be affected by what's going on. Like you want to be in a position where you're helping others going through it. Okay, so I need you to start focusing on building your capacity and also diversifying your revenue to ensure that your nonprofit is not in that position. Now, the next layer that we're going to talk about is most organizations don't even have a fundraising calendar. How you don't have a fundraising calendar? First of all, so you just wake up like at the like out of the blue. We're gonna do a crab feed. We're gonna do a gala. Great. Okay. Like, no, we can't do that. You need a fundraising calendar, because if you were able to put these things in place, if you had a grant calendar, a fundraising calendar, calendars are helpful. They're for you. There is a purpose behind the madness. If you were able to sit down, right? Sit down, come up with a plan. This is how much money we need to raise. These are things that we can do. This is the capacity we have. Like, Come up with a fundraising calendar and determine how you're going to raise the money that you plan to raise. Because then let's say your goal for the year is $100,000. How are you going to raise $100,000? Now, this is where I'm gonna shameless plug right now. I have a 3-day workshop coming up April 22nd to April 24th, and it's limited to 30 spots. And that's what I'm going to be working on with nonprofits that join this container. We're going to talk about like why it's important to have a fundraising calendar, right? And everybody's going to be working with me. It's like having a consultant in your pocket for 3 days. Okay. So we're going to talk about what that should look like, what activities you can have, start building your fundraising calendar based on what you can have, identify the gaps that you have before we finalize the fundraising calendar to ensure you're able to do that. So if the workshop is something that you want to join, definitely drop the word workshop in the comments, and I'll make sure I send you the link to sign up. And that is April 22nd to April 24th, and it's happening from 2 p.m. Pacific to 2 to 5 p.m. So I'm allotting 3 hours so everybody can get time. Not only are you working individually, but I'm there to support you as well. Because then, listen, I'm like, I love this stuff. Okay. I love coming up with ideas of creative things you can do. If you can't do it, I'll tell you you can't do it. Why are you wasting your time? Okay. So, these nonprofits don't have a real fundraising calendar, and they're launching campaigns at the last minute, hoping something sticks. Now I'm back to the next layer. Okay, so yeah, I pivoted topics ASAP. So, so the organization that don't have fundraising calendars, they're basically launching things at the last minute, hoping something sticks. That's what I meant. They're basically running on vibes and prayer because that's a big thing right now, but they don't have a strategy. And that's a problem in the nonprofit industry. You need a strategy to be able to do the work that you're doing. Because without a strategy, you're basically leading blind, leading like you're going and you're going in blind, and that's not okay. And that leads to donor fatigue, that leads to team burnout and a whole lot of anxiety. Because you end up coming home, oh my God, this is so stressful, right? Oh my God, I can't do this. Oh my God, I'm doing too much. It's a lot of work. No. You need a strategy. You need a strategy. You need to get where you need to get. Because then if you do not have that strategy, what happens to your organization and what happens to you as a leader is that you're losing momentum, and it's hard for you to start growing. Okay, so I need you to like really understand that part, because that part is going to mean a lot if you are trying to grow an organization that is financially sustainable and makes a real impact in your community. So I'm going to tell you about another client. So I told you about the one that secured $300,000, right? So there's another one that secured another six figure. It was 163. And they celebrated, expanded their programming, hired more staff, albeit some of them were temporary staff. But when the renewal didn't come through on time the next year, it was a hot mess. They had no backup plan, no diversified income, right? No clear strategy of to sustain what they built, because what was happening is like all the staff they hired for the amount of time, they had to let them go. They had to let them go and basically figure out, okay, can we rehire these people when we get the money? Now that's problematic. So a few things happened over time, with because their team consisted of two people, just people on the board, right? So there was a need to restructure everything from the ground up. That included monthly giving, donor engagement, corporate partnerships. That's another thing, right? And a calendar that just did not focus on one source of income. Like, I hope you caught that. Your calendar cannot focus on one source of income. Okay. So what's happening with them, and I'm so happy for them, is they're operating now with more control. They're doing amazing things. They have more peace, way more predictability, which is very good. And as a business owner, I will tell you predictability is a good thing. As a nonprofit, you are a business. You just have a tax exempt status. Predictability is very great to have, okay? So what I want you to hear and leave here with today. Unpredictable revenue is not a fundraising problem. It's a planning and infrastructure problem. These are the two things I want you to retain from today. Okay, if you were able to catch that and understand that, definitely drop a 2 in the comments. I want to know. Now, the strongest organizations I work with, they usually have multiple streams of revenue. They have a real calendar that aligns with capacity. They have systems that track, forecast, and adjust. And lastly, the leaders, they treat revenue as a team responsibility and not just the executive director's job. Now, these are things that are very good to have if your nonprofit is healthy. Okay, it's not about getting more money, it's about knowing where it's coming from and when. Because the thing is, your nonprofit has a vision, it has goals, and you need revenue to be able to support those goals. Now, if you're not able to generate that, then that's going to be a big issue for you. So, that's what's going to allow you to lead with clarity and not fear, because listen, fear doesn't belong here, okay? Because then I was going to say what I was going to say, but I'm not on TikTok, I'm on Facebook, so I have to behave. So, you have to really think about that. And then if you're tired of scrambling every time a grant doesn't come through, that's the other thing that happens. You apply for the grant, you're praying, crossing your fingers and toes and everything on your body that the grant comes through. That's like 50K or 100K I applied for. This money is going to support this program and everything. But the money doesn't come through. It doesn't come through. So you want to stop doing that. Okay. You want your team to stop asking, are we good this month? Because I remember at one point I was hiring, I was interviewing and hiring for a nonprofit, and one interviewer asked me, will I still have a job next year? I'm like, wait, what? Yeah, this is a full-time position. No, because then I worked for a nonprofit and they told me I was good, but within a year they had to let me go because they lost their funding. You don't want team members to have to worry about if they're good this month or if they're good next month. Okay. So if you want to lead with more strategy instead of stress, I'd love to support in mapping that. And definitely join the 3-day Fix Your Fundraising Flow workshop, which is April 22nd to April 24th. I will put that in the comments once I am done, because then I have to find a link on my computer. And for those who know, I can't do two things at once, talking and finding these links. No, it doesn't work for me. Okay, there's no fluff, no pressure, just clarity and solutions, 3 days, action-packed. Because at the end of the day, I want you to start thinking about your mission and the vision of your organization, because you need to stop doing guesswork on that, and let's build a system to match it. But that's it on my end. I'm out. I'm gonna go. If you have any questions, drop in the comments. Thank you for those who join, and I appreciate you, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye, y'all.